What if we realize our wife is falling to sin?
When you began to trust, when you began to have this incredible relationship, you became more confident and stronger and resilient, then I was attracted to that.
And so all of those things can all be upheld within the heart of a man who is pursuing and striving for sanctity.
Oh my gosh, that could be 10 years. That could be 20 years of that kind of patience, and how am I to endure it?
Hey everyone, thanks for joining us here on another episode of The Catholic Gentleman. We are your hosts, both coming back from doing some speaking engagements. I'm John Heinen, and we've got Devin, who actually did 5 talks in less than 24 hours. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, less than 18, I think.
less than 18 hours. Man, that's a lot. That's a lot of talks, but it's also a lot to digest. How was it all? Like, I don't want to presume things. How many men showed up? What was the experience?
Max capacity for this retreat, 60.
Praise
so that's
God.
what they had.
Praise
It's
God.
at a monastery. It's in Nebraska. Great group of guys. They were awesome. And I think the retreat was awesome. It was excellent. But yeah, we were fast forward. I mean, it's crammed. The guy, Dan, he's a good guy, great guy. Dan is the facilitator. And every year he crams in just a lot. This year he crammed in one more talk than the usual 4. So he's just great. Yeah. So it was excellent. Yeah. I love doing the retreats. The retreats they're great because the men, you can just see them over the period of the retreat. They're getting it more and more. They're opening up more and more. Plus, there's the bond of trust that's being developed between you and them. They realize you're not a fake. You're not in it for yourself. You really want them to go to the next level, and they realize that, and then they want to go to the next level.
Praise God. Yeah, well, let's all keep them in your prayers. Anybody listening to this, hey, I got a shout out, and I want to share this with you. A gentleman who listens to our episode said, I used to listen to your show all the time, but because of your show, I started praying the rosary instead of listening to your podcast. So I'm actually not listening to your podcast anymore. I've been praying the rosary every day. And I was like, that's a rejoice. Like let's rejoice in that. And I mean that seriously. For all listeners here, we're glad that you're here, but if the Holy Spirit is asking you to do something else, right? That's what both Devin and I want for you. And so, I mean, he said that. And I was like a little overjoyed that was the reality of this man's life. So praise be to God for that. So today we're going to be talking about one of the quiet frustrations that many good men have, and what happens when you selflessly want your wife's happiness, but every solution you offer seems to make things worse. This is really important because we find ourselves attempting new ways of bettering our wife's life, and she ends up often receiving it as judgment, or as if you're a burden. She's a burden to you, and so maybe you've tried everything, right? You're giving advice. You've stopped giving advice. You stay silent. You're patient, and still it feels like nothing reaches her heart or helps improve her life. You're not trying to fix her because you don't love her. You're trying because you do. But what if the problem isn't your effort, it's just your approach? And so I'm going to lay forth with Devin kind of how to win her back, how to improve her life with this framework of 4 items. I'd like to call them 4 Ps, but there's actually 3 Ps and one that isn't that I've created for us to walk through today. So before we begin, please click that like and subscribe. We are here the last week of October, where we are offering a free rosary for all new annual subscriptions on Catholic Gentleman Plus. We've had over 1,000 men that have joined Catholic Gentleman Plus, and I would love for you to be one of them. I'd love for you to see all the greatness that we have inside of there, get those daily Saint Quote emails, and to join this movement of men that are improving their lives, to improve their families and improve society. And we'd be grateful, and we'll send you that rosary, as soon as you sign up. So every husband knows that you love your wife, you see her struggling, and you want to help. You try words, those don't work. You try actions, those don't work. You reflect and reflect and reflect, and you try to come up with new solutions, and those don't work. And so ultimately you stay silent. And then you stay silent for 2 to 3 to 4 months, and you think, okay, it's still not working. I'm going to try a different approach. And it's out of love. And I kind of want to, again, establish that we're not trying to improve our wives' lives because she's a burden to us, but because we truthfully love her and we want her happiness. And everything we do, though, seems to fail. And that happened to me not too long ago. And I don't mind sharing the details, is that we've lost 7 kids, and we've lost them in miscarriage. And we're pregnant again, praise God, with another child, but there's still that fear in my heart as well as my wife's heart. And in my patience and in my silence, I slipped up and I decided one day to try and help her through my words. And immediately it was received as she was burdening me with her emotions, which wasn't the reality. And it kind of broke her. And that was the complete opposite of what I was trying to do out of love. No, she realized that. And we've had great, beautiful conversations because there's like this historical reality to our lives. But I wanted to bring this to the front because in preparing this, I bettered my life and I want to help better the lives of those who are listening. So, Devin, why do you think men are so discouraged with their relationship with their wife when they cannot seem to make her happy or improve things for her?
Well, obviously, the end of marriage is union. And so if there's no union, or there isn't kind of an intense level of unity in a good way, then of course you're going to be discouraged, because men are goal oriented often. I mean, when we say these things, people get upset because we make these blanket statements. What we're saying is generally men are goal oriented, solution based. So they want to have a great marriage. Generally, if you're a good Catholic guy, you want to have a great marriage. You want your wife to be happy. When your wife isn't happy and you're not experiencing union in marriage, you feel like you're failing. And that failing leads to a personal disrespect. And that personal disrespect then affects the majority of your life, where you're insecure, you have low self-esteem, and then you're not respected by your friends, your coworkers. And there you go.
What a
You're
cycle.
in this pitiful level of lack of self-respect, lack of gaining respect, because you're a failure at home.
Yeah. Yes, and we unintentionally find ourselves in this situation, right?
Yep.
We've got this, I'm going to just call it a false ideal of what marriage and our relationship with our wives should be. Maybe it's a false American ideal. I'm not sure exactly, but there's this sense that it should look like this, and that we see it on TV, and there's this ideal that we place in front of ourselves, and then when we're not living up, it's debilitating. There's like this deep discouragement that we can experience, and like you said, that cycle just continues. Is it safe, Devin, to say, is this again broad statement here, but that we have a masculine instinct to fix? Like, is that a reality of men's life, that we like to fix things?
Let's look at YouTube. How many videos are there on fixing things, and how many men look at those videos? I think that's a pretty good litmus test. We can pretty much gauge it by that. We do love to fix things. We don't like problems, and and I think in the Catholic world, at least, where we're called to be spiritual leaders, there's a lot of burden that's resting on our shoulders to be the ones that do solve the problems. So I think that, yes, we don't love to fix things necessarily. We want to fix things. Because why? Because we just want things to run smoothly. But there's two kind of polar kind of avenues we take. One, we just want to avoid all the problems and say it'll take care of itself. So there's really no seeking a solution. My marriage will kind of take care of itself. The kids will take care of itself. Or hypervigilance and kind of an oppressive kind of dictatorship. I'm going to micromanage this situation until we get it right. And neither one of those approaches work.
No, not at all. And I think that when I was thinking about it, about fixing, like there's something at its heart that is, it's how we express our love and how we express our care, right? We're so outcome oriented. And so we want we want to be appreciated and respected for those things which we fix. But then I found myself also thinking about all the things in my house that are my domain, if you will, that need to be fixed. And my wife, who lives in it every single day and sees it 30 or 40 times, realizes that it's not getting fixed.
Mm.
And I see that it needs to get fixed when I come home after work, and it'll be months because other things will prioritize. And right, so I don't want to give myself this out. But when we're talking about the emotions of our wives, I used to have this burden early on in my marriage where I kind of treated myself as my wife's spiritual director.
You treated yourself as your wife's spiritual director?
I treated myself. Yeah, exactly. So I acted as if I was my wife's spiritual
Wow.
director. I was like, oh, this is my authority, right? Like, this is what I need to do. And then and that didn't work. Spoiler alert. It did not work. It did not work at all. And so, but that's why I think this is a
why doesn't it
conversation
work?
so important.
Let's just go right there. Why doesn't it work? I'll tell you why it doesn't work.
Please.
Because our wives know us.
Yeah.
So like my wife knows my weaknesses, my failures, where I have personality trait defects, et cetera, et cetera. So if I'm trying to be her spiritual director and direct her, she already knows what's under the hood, and she's going to be like, well, wait a minute, you've got this problem, you've got that problem. And so it seems very, in a sense, hypocritical. And I think so really what we have to do is we have to learn to come alongside our wives. Yes, we have spiritual authority, leadership that has been given to us, but we're called to share, paradokein in the Greek, to share that authority with our wives and have that mutual harmony in the way that we express that authority in the family, in our marriage. So it's very important that we come alongside our wives, and she's the help meet, the ezer kenegdo, as one hand, the right hand is to the left, that essential counterpart. We need to do that. We need to foster that. So it's like a partnership. It's a mission collaborative, not top down.
Yes. And then you meet with the reality that our wives have this feminine need to be understood and to be feel secure and protected in our love. And so that doesn't happen when you're attempting to point out all her spiritual deficiencies as you have identified them. And so, but hey,
you're not understanding,
truthful.
You're diagnosing, you're not understanding, you're diagnosing, like, this is wrong. I don't really want to know why this is wrong. Just fix it. That's not going to work.
No, agreed. I grabbed a good quote here from Alice von Hildebrand, who said, "To be understood is to be loved. The woman's heart does not seek power, but communion." And in its heart, that's what we're doing. And is that what we have to do? Actually, whether we're doing it or not, that's what we have to do. And that's why I broke up this framework here, because we're men, and it's helpful to break apart this framework so that we can discern how to go forward. Like, what's the plan of action? Yes, Devin.
So that quote is good. So women don't seek power; they seek to be understood. But I would add, unless they're not being understood, then they seek power. Because so if I'm not striving to understand my wife at a real core level, and I'm not listening to her attentively and affirming her, well, then she's gonna. I'm not my wife, but I think women in general will try to get some power because they don't feel like they have any power when they're not understood. And so, because what they're really wanting is they're wanting their husband's attention. And how do you get someone's attention? Well, you gotta have a little power over them.
So to avoid that, let's dive right into these 4 points that I brought up of the different ways. And actually, this came out in a wonderful conversations I had with my wife. But the first dimension of our relationship with our spouse is what I like to call the personal dimension. And so that personal dimension is everything that your wife is dealing internally, emotionally, right? Because when we look through these 4 stages that we're going to talk about here, you'll see, like, not everything is that the ceiling needs to get repaired, the fence needs to get fixed, right? Some of the things are the fact that your wife is struggling with anxiety or depression, and you want to help that, right? That's a personal thing. There's also the personal between our relationships, and so I have had a great life with my wife to the point where I've realized, guess what? I can't necessarily fix her personal internal struggles, right? I can't directly fix those. And that's something that I like to bring up on a very consistent basis here, is that if your wife is struggling with a certain degree of perceived inability, so say your wife doesn't believe she's good at X, fill in the blank, and you want to encourage her that she is, and you can say that over and over and over and over again, but it doesn't seem to be working. There's not a direct solution here in the personal dimension that you're going to be able to quickly and easily correct, right? You're not going to be able to convince her otherwise. What she needs, though, is for you to be on that journey with her. Like, she needs you to feel secure and protected in your love. Let me use my example here of the situation with our miscarriages and the fear of losing this child. What my wife needs constantly is for me to tell her, honey, I'm in this with you. We're gonna get through this. Like, whatever God, whatever our life has, God's gonna get us through this, and we're gonna get through this together. And I love you, and I'm so glad that we have this child, and I'm so glad that we have this life together. And that's what she needs, is that consistent affirmation, because again, words are not going to be able to fix it. Dr. Greg Bottaro was on our show. We've talked about this, right? The woman has the nail in her head and doesn't want you to pull the nail out. She wants you to listen and be present to her. So, Devin, I'd love for your thoughts to help expand on this area here, so that we can help men remain peaceful in this struggle and in this consistency, to be consistent in this situation.
Yeah. So I think we need to just go to the pain, and because that's where all this is happening, is in the pain. So if we go to the pain, what's happening? She feels misunderstood and unloved, and she also feels judged, like that she is a problem that needs to be fixed. She's broken, and somehow, somewhere, she needs to be repaired. That's a terrible place for a woman. Okay. On the other hand, then we feel like we do all sorts of things to address that, and we're missing the mark. We're trying all sorts of different things. So then what's the pain for us? So she feels like as though she's being assessed as though she's broken, she's misunderstood, she's lonely, and nothing's working. And then on our side, we feel like we're helpless, we're weak, and then there's a disconnect.
Yeah.
And then that disconnect creates, as it goes on, it creates resentment and distance and a fissure. Okay. Am I painting the picture correctly?
Yeah, it's perfect. Exactly.
Okay. So what we have is we have two camps. We have two camps of loneliness within marriage and eventual resentment building, and this distance that seems to be insurmountable. So as a man, fundamentally, I think there is one core principle. And unless we address this core principle, these four areas, it's never going to work. And the one core principle is this, is you have to work on yourself. Primarily, before anything, it's not her. Don't blame, don't accuse, don't assess. We have to work on ourselves first, or else she will be last.
Yes. Yeah, I'm glad that you stated that up front, because what we're going to realize as we go through these other dimensions here is that, and we're like, the next one's the moral dimension, right? Virtues and vices that I'm going to talk about, which is different than personal. And I think that that's really more, because we have to assess the situation. But in the end, you're exactly right. We have to be working on ourselves. We have to be working on virtue. In this situation, it could have been, let's just say it was 4 months where your wife is struggling with a family wound, a historical situation that happened that is still lingering and is still a part of her identity, and you want to change that because you love her, and you've been silent and you've been patient and you've been loving for 4 months, but then you go in and you try and fix it, and it doesn't work, because you're exactly right. Now she sees herself as a burden. Now she sees, now she's actually sad and sorrowful that she even brought it up to you. And now this has gotten worse. But what if we were more patient, right? That's what I was reflecting on. I was like, what if I was just more patient? What if I realized that the solution there's not a solution to my wife's happiness, because her happiness is not an object, right? It's this relationship. And so being more aware of this relationship in these dimensions here is working on myself, is denying myself, taking up my cross and following after Christ, which is exactly what we're called to do. So I agree.
Yeah. So I selected 3 men that I have met over the course of years. Each of them have been married over 25 years, and each of them have had long extended periods in which their wives have not responded. They've had very difficult moments in their marriage. And let's just say I'll call this guy husband number 1. Right. Husband number 1 had some incredible advice. And he said, in working on yourself, because you can't change your wife.
That's right.
You can barely change yourself. I mean, Amen. Let's just face it, right?
Amen. Let's be honest.
But yes. The project is you do need to change. And so what happens is you're talking about this patience. We need to be patient with her and, and wait on her and all that stuff. And as far as me, if I hear that, I'm just like, oh my gosh, that could be 10 years. That could be 20 years of that kind of patience. And how am I to endure it? Well, this husband number 1, he gives some great advice, because the tension can become terrible. The fissure can become almost insurmountable, where it can't be bridged. And what do you do when you feel like you're stuck in a marriage that you cannot divorce from or separate from, yet you are sinking in quicksand? He said the temptation is going to be that we're going to turn toward false consolation, because that deprivation of love and union in the marriage is a desolation. Yeah. And in that desolation, we're going to seek to offset it with some kind of consolation, because we're not experiencing consolation in our marriage. So what we're going to do is we're going to be tempted to look at pornography. We're going to be tempted to seek the validation of a coworker who's female. We're going to seek to hang out with the guys and hang out at the bars, or, whatever it is. It's going to be football night or whatever. And we're going to do all of these things to try to find consolation rather than remaining in the desolation. So how can we avoid this? And he gives some great advice. You need to go to the spiritual consolation, not the carnal appetite route. You have to go to God, because only by going to God can he fill you, can he sustain you, can he make you bulletproof, so it's no longer you who lives, but Christ who lives in you, so that you can be patient with your wife. Otherwise, it's utterly impossible. It's just utterly impossible. So acknowledge the pain, acknowledge the distance, and acknowledge the fact before God, I am so weak here. I'm seeking carnal, illicit, my appetites are seeking carnal, illicit consolation. So Lord, please come and help me and give me the consolation spiritually that I need. And there's many ways we can obtain that from the Lord, but that's where we need to go. We need to let him into the pain in our personal poverty so that he can give us the patience.
Yeah. Would it be safe to say that our role is not to remove her pain or her suffering, but to learn how to accompany her through it with that consolation that coming from Christ, right? With that faith that is connected with him?
It's exactly that, because if you think about it, that's what Christ did. Christ came alongside of us, and even in a sense, he carried the cross of our sin with us. He didn't say, okay, let's just get rid of this. Let's just push that to the side and hey, let's all be happy now. No, he comes alongside the bride, the church, and he works with us. That's what we're called to do with our wives. So I think that's a really great point. And I think that that's where we feel loved, is when I've expressed like terrible pains in my life, like I was going through some serious difficulties, and I remember expressing it to someone who I thought was a very close friend. And he just said, yeah, we all suffer. And I was like, whoa, okay. So no compassion, no empathy. Yeah, we all suffer. Another person, it must be God's will. Must be God's will. So there's no coming alongside that person. There's no carrying the cross with that person. There's no Simon of Cyrene within sight. We're all called to be Simon of Cyrenes. Our wives are carrying their cross of their hormonal deficiencies or struggles, their mineral deficiencies. Maybe they've got some mental, struggles, depression. Maybe they're overwhelmed with, cortisol levels shooting through the roof because they've got, so many children and they've got wounds from the past, or you're
Body
struggling
wounds,
with your job. We're called to come alongside and just walk with them and carry that cross, but not take it away from them.
Yeah. So with that, I want to move to another dimension here, which is the moral dimension. And the moral dimension is these virtues or vices. Again, I'd like to bring up this idealism that we have here. Like basically our wives or our lives, spiritually speaking, have to look like this. And we have this sense of like, we are always going to be prepared for Mass the night before so that all of our kids' shoes are in line, and we've got this ideal. We're all going to be well put together on Sunday morning, and we're going to get to Mass 10 minutes before Mass begins, and we're all going to be, including all your kids, are going to be preparing themselves for the glory of Mass, right? We put these false ideals in ourselves of what our spiritual lives look like. Your wife should be praying like this. Your wife should be praying this long, and she should be praying like this. And so we enter in that. I do want to ask, though, like I want to go directly to it. What if, and I want to ask you, Devin, this, what if we realize our wife is falling to sin, such as like gossip or constant bitterness and negative thoughts towards others? What if our wife is actually neglecting her prayer? What solution would you give to men, or what counsel would you give to men in that situation?
Well, first of all, don't try to control her. Because the more that you try to control her, the more she's going to deflect and blame you for it, or she's just going to dig in her heels and keep going. So what a woman or what any human being needs is accompaniment. Okay. So like if my kids or my wife, they are not operating at the spiritual level that I want them to, the worst thing for me to do is to tell them to do it. Hey, you need to be at this level. You need to be doing this. You need to be doing that. The best thing I can do is exemplify that myself without tooting my own horn and bringing attention to myself. So if my kids hear me chanting the divine office, and I don't tell them I'm doing it, or if they know that I'm going down to my chapel in the morning very early, or if I'm going to daily Mass, they know that. They can say, you know what, my father isn't being a hypocrite when he calls us to prayer, family prayer at night. I think one of the things I've noticed with my wife, so I've been praying for years, very early in the morning, and my wife didn't do that for many years, but now she does it. Why does she do it? Well, she told me something just the other day that was very alarming and convicting. And yet at the same time, it's given me so much hope. So she said, yes, you were praying. Yes, you're going to daily Mass. Yes, you're leading our family in prayer. You're doing all the right things. But because of the way that you didn't trust God in certain situations, or the way that you beat yourself up, or whatever it was, she goes, I just saw it as hypocrisy. And I think that's a huge message, is that we can be checking all the boxes, wearing the suit jackets to Mass, going to the right Mass, we think, getting all the kids in line, and we just look like we're one big, holy, happy family. But the problem is if I'm not working on myself and I don't have this relationship with God the Father where I trust him, and that trust is coming out and I'm reflecting God the Father's love to my family and to my wife, because basically this is the principle. The God that I perceive God the Father to be is the Father that I am going to reflect to my wife and my children. And so if I am not good with God the Father, I am not going to be good with them. And that's what my wife saw. But then on the flip side, she's like, but then when you changed, when you began to trust, when you began to have this incredible relationship, you became more confident and stronger and resilient, then I was attracted to that. So the thing is, it's not about coercion or forcing or telling. It's about living to such a degree that everybody in the family says, man, I want that too.
That's right. It's so we're not supposed to be her spiritual director. and I think
I don't want to be.
It's exactly right. It's such a good point. You got me thinking about evangelization. That the heart of evangelization is an indwelling of the Spirit that just erupts within you, and you want to share it with other people, right? You have this abiding relationship with truth and with reality, with humility, with all the virtues, and you just out of love want to share that with other people. It's not because you're obligated to do it. It's not because you were told you need to go do this, so go do that, right? Sometimes us men need that. But my point is that at the heart of true evangelization, that which converts and brings people into the fold and brings people into the family is just this Spirit that's coming forth from within us, this love that's coming forth within us. And what you're saying here is that within our relationship to our wives, the same thing has to be happening, is that the Spirit has to be guiding us in all of these moments. I couldn't agree more, because I've experienced the opposite of it, of attempting to, in my pride, comment on all the good things that I'm doing, right? Oh yeah, I got that. I got a good, my prayer time today went from 45 minutes to an hour. And it's not that over the top, right? I'm not that insensitive, but these little things do start coming out, right?
Man, today I levitated for 3 minutes. It was unbelievable.
I know, right? Exactly. Oh my goodness, the miracle that our Lord gave me. And
but here's the deal, John. The heart of evangelization. So I remember when I was on first surrendered my life to Jesus Christ, and I was on fire for the faith. And I remember just quoting scriptures left and right, getting in arguments with Baptists and Methodists and Calvinists and all these people. And it just was like hollow. Like I didn't convert anyone hardly. And why? Because, and this was the principle, because how I acted during suffering and opposition just in life, or chaos or calamity, didn't measure up to what I was talking about. And so my wife, that's what she's saying. How you respond and how you act under suffering and pain and duress, that's what I assess. So I can trust you if you're able to trust God during those moments. But if you don't trust God in the pain, how the heck can I trust you?
That's right.
It's all about how we are acting during the pain and the duress and the torment and the trials and the sufferings. That's the evangelization.
I would agree. I would say, when I was speaking of evangelization, there was certainly a predisposition for that, right? That God is, because if the Holy Spirit is guiding, because when you're talking about kind of being an apologist and wanting to convert everybody and to get into arguments, I think a lot of that is self-promoted and self-motivated, because I was the same way in college. When I fell in love with apologetics and was falling in love with my faith, I would say I wanted to convert everybody, but what I definitely wanted to do was win arguments and prove them wrong. And so now I'm totally different, right? My life has grown totally different. I want to disconnect from the world and spend more time in adoration. I want to be there with Christ on a more regular basis. I want to be there and allow that to transform me, and allow the Spirit to guide me in all those conversations. And it's possible. I've seen it happen. I've seen these saintly men that are capable of doing that, and are indeed allowing they're conduits of the Holy Spirit, and that brings in far more individuals. And so you're right, but within that comes every dimension of our lives: the suffering, the goods and the bad, the struggles, the difficulties, the vices and the virtues, that which we're working towards and that which we realize still needs to be worked on. And so all of those things can all be upheld within the heart of a man who is pursuing and striving for sanctity, and pursuing and striving for this holiness, which we're called to do. Yeah, you were going to say.
No, just going back to what you were saying. So what do you do if you notice something in your wife that is, say, sinful or just off? I think if you yourself see, it's Christ's teaching of don't look at the speck in someone else's eye when you got the beam in your own. And this applies to marriage heavily. So if I am willing to address the beam in my own eye, and I'm working on that, and so when times are difficult, I'm not complaining and grumbling and whining. Then if my wife is complaining, let's say it's complaining, I can say to her, hey, you know what, babe, I just been noticing that the complaining's been kind of increasing. Is there any way we can, it's not going to go good at first. It's just never going to go good when you point it out, but it's going to go worse, way worse, if I am a complainer and I am a whiner and I'm a hypocrite. And there's no way that message is going to come across. Marriage is a partnership between two friends, deep friends. And we should be able to say, hey, I've noticed, my wife is great about this. She's like, I notice you're a little hard on the kids tonight. And I'm like, yeah, okay, you're right. You're right. So then I apologize to the kids, and she takes it too. I noticed this or whatever. But it's because we've got that developed trust where she knows I'm not a hypocrite, and I know she's not. And also I know she's not out to get me. And I know she knows I'm not out to get her. Very important.
Hey everyone, it's the month of October, which is also the month of the Holy Rosary inside of Holy Mother Church, which also means for all new annual subscriptions inside of Catholic Gentleman Plus, we are giving away this handmade $100 St. Michael Rosary through a partnership with Catholic Woodworkers. So grateful for the work they do. You're also going to get this unique quote book that we offer. This quote book is only for Catholic Gentleman Plus supporters. We have over 1,000 men inside, and all of them are able to get the daily saint quotes and all the content that we have. We've come out with over 30 unique sessions that break up into really 3 categories: the self-mastery and growing in virtue, a spiritual life, prayer, and why we need to do this, and how to understand our Blessed Mother as men, or relationships, how to be a good husband, how to be a good brother, how to be a good neighbor, how to be a good father. All of those things we go into inside of Catholic Gentleman Plus. And man, we've got some incredible things planned for next year in 2026. And I want you to be the first to hear about them, and I want you to be the first to receive them. So if you want this rosary and all this other great stuff, head over to CatholicGentlemanPlus.com. Join us today. That's so important. You're on the same team, right? We say that all the time, that we're not in opposition. We're not enemies. We're not competitors in life. We're on the same team. And when we get that right, everything you're saying is exactly right. Like, we have to be constantly working ourselves. We do, right? We are called to charitably and lovingly talk to our wives about these things. But what we're talking about is that foundation has to be built before we do that. Because if that foundation is just on sand, or worse, on water, or been divided, go listen to our episode on 4 ways to win her heart, right? We've got to fix ourselves if that rupture has become so deep, as we talked about at the beginning of this episode, where it just divides and divides and divides. But when that foundation is set, we can absolutely have those conversations, and we can have them with love, and our wife doesn't see.
I just think one of the most detrimental factors, one of the most detrimental kind of factors in our marriage is like wanting to have this appearance that we are the Catholic family that has it all together, or we have this great Catholic marriage, and we want everyone else to perceive that. So we're like, we want our kids to dress a certain way. We want our daughters to veil. We've got all these things perfectly in line. And we're so focused on how we're portraying ourselves to the world, so it's externalized, that we forget about the internal, or we just kind of gloss over that. And our wives become bitter because of that. Because it's just like PK syndrome. You got the pastor's kid syndrome, where the wife and the kids, they always feel like they're in the fishbowl in Protestant church when the dad is the pastor. Everybody's looking at them. How are they behaving? How are they dressing? How are they acting? What do they do on Friday night? Are they partying? That kind of thing. And I think our wives, they get sick and tired of us saying, hey, we don't say this, but let's look like this. Let's act like this. Behave in public. And our wives are like, well, that's not reality. That's not who we really are. You know what I mean? And I think that when we work on the marriage, and and love our wives right where they're at, then there's a more tendency, yeah, let's dress up for mass. And hey, if one of the kids has got, two left shoes on or whatever, or,
Yep.
or forgot his jacket, great. You know what? But because life is messy and we're not perfect, and in our littleness, God is great. And we need to learn to embrace our littleness more and more, our messiness more and more.
That's right. And that kind of goes back to that false idealism that we kind of place upon ourselves, and I myself have succumbed to. And so, yeah, let's move on. Let's talk about this next dimension, which is the practical dimension. And so we've got the personal dimension, right? Those are the emotions and current state of our wife. We also have the moral dimension, right, which is that virtues and vices. And then we have a practical dimension. And when I talk about the practical dimension, it's everything from like finances and parenting of children and routines and how the day is ordered or ruled, right? Like this is the practical dimension of something that we have to talk about. And one of the distinctions that I realized when I was going through this was that there's like the neutral territory, and then there's that which is we call it the hostile territory. But we need to know these things. So, for instance, going into to marriage, perhaps your wife doesn't feel like she's a good cook because her mother never taught her, and her family ate out all the time. And so you have discussed with your wife that she would do the cooking, but she never feels like she's a good cook. And if you are disappointed with some of that which she has been cooking, this is a hostile territory. This is something that we want to be cautious with, because you understand that dimension. Versus you both realize that your children have to, depending on where they're at, have to brush their teeth twice a day, have to, learn how to tie their shoes, have to get to school, or your children are in adolescence, and there's all these new wave of difficulties and experiences, and we know that we have to meet our daughters or our sons where they're at as they're going through puberty, etc. Like, those are practical dimensions that we have to come together. And for me, when I'm talking about this, it's all about making this meaningful and intentional in our time to discuss. And so when for that, I see your look, Devin, here.
No,
What I mean,
I'm listening.
yeah, what I mean by that,
follow.
is that like we have to set up an intentional time that we're going to discuss these things with our spouse. You can't just when you're disappointed that your children ran out the door and didn't brush their teeth. I don't know why that example is coming to my brain, but you get the gist. They ran out the door and they didn't brush their teeth. That's not when you look at your wife and you're like, there they are again. They didn't brush their teeth. You didn't help them or remind them to brush their teeth. That's not it, right? Like, we have to find those meaningful times where we can intentionally discuss. And then when we approach them, we've talked about this before, that it's a safe space. It's a non-accusational situation. It's an opportunity to discuss these practical problems that need to be fixed collectively. And so I like to bring up practical as a separate dimension. And Devin, you've got thoughts. I want to hear them.
So no, I want to follow. So what we're talking about here is the operation of the household.
Yeah, the operation of the house, exactly.
So what's it like for you guys? Did you fall into your rules, or did you have to identify them, or what did you?
I think that's a really good. I'm glad that you just brought that up. So I learned this the hard way, that what is not discussed is not directly assumed. So by that, I mean, I assumed my wife would handle the dishes and the cooking and the dishes. And often she did. But then other times she didn't, and it frustrated me. And then I realized, well, we've never had this conversation. Same thing. Let's do the reverse. Garbage, right? My wife assumed that I was taking care of the garbage. I would collect all the garbage. I would get the garbage out twice a week, make sure if we're doing recycling, what's going to be recycled, et cetera. That's on me. And 80% of the time I did it. But then the 20% of the time that I didn't do it, it would frustrate my wife because we had never had that conversation, right? We had never actually had that conversation and discussed what our roles were and who was planning on doing what to get these things done. And the more you start digging into this, the more you realize, oh my goodness, everything. So Father Ripker, I'm going to bring him up. Everything is in the domain of the husband. That includes doing dishes. That includes changing diapers. So if dishes and diapers aren't getting done and you haven't communicated and agreed upon, that's on you to make sure that those diapers and dishes are getting done, because that's within your domain. But again, that's where it comes, that communication, that helpmate, that right and left hand, as you were talking about. When we don't communicate those things and we just assume those things, that's the cesspool where Satan can just play, and we can start accusing and we can start assuming negative thoughts of our spouse.
Yeah, I see a danger. Well, that's all great. I see a danger too in this, is that men are like, well, I do communicate to my wife. I tell her what to do. And I'm like, that's never going to work, buddy.
Nope.
Yeah. So that's not what we're talking about here. I just think we need to be perfectly clear, is that we're not saying, okay, these are the roles, and babe, this is what you're going to be doing. I expect it all to be done by the time I get home from work tonight. That's just stupidity. That's never going to work. One thing that I've found, I don't know if this works for you, but we just kind of fell into our roles. It wasn't like it was something like where she said, I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. We just kind of fell into our roles onto where we could help one another. And it was very natural. But then what I think was really beautiful was at a turning point where I realized, boy, my wife is shouldering a great deal of the household burdens. And I noticed that she's overwhelmed. And I remember, the kids were getting kind of old enough. And I was like, hey guys, let's all participate in cleaning up after dinner. Mom cooked. Mom, you go lay on the couch for a little while. We got this. And it was things like that where it was like, so like, let's say she's been doing laundry like all week long and it's just been overwhelming. And I'm like, hey girls, let's all do this for mom, or whatever, or girls, why don't you do it for mom? Whatever. But the point is that we're there to alleviate one another's burdens. And I think it's very machismo, and it's a false masculinity to say, no, that's a woman's job. No, she should be folding the laundry. She should be making dinner. No, there's going to be times where you need to step up, or in this case, whatever you want to say, serve down, whatever you got to do. You've got to lower yourself. That's the point I'm trying to make, in order to raise everyone else up. What I found is when a man does that, he sets that pace, and generally everybody wants to follow, because they say, you know what? Dad is doing this. My father is doing this. So it's not beneath me either. But what we love to do as a family is like, we love to do it together. And that's where all the conversation, all the great things kind of happen, is in that, it's great. We joke around, we have great conversations, but we're all working together. That's what a family's all about.
I agree. And so there's a few things that we brought up here. And one, and I like just go back over them within the practical dimension, is that setting aside that time for meaningful and intentional discussion with your spouse. And then what you're saying here is just that leading by example, right? We're leading in prayer. We're leading by example. We're not leading by control and domination and some banner of authority that we wave and we just tell her what to do. That's not at all. We're leading by service, right? I was just reading Jose Maria Escriva on the life of St. Joseph, and he talks about how life of St. Joseph was defined by service of others. He was thinking, as he was serving, of our Blessed Mother in Christ and everyone at Nazareth, right? He was constantly leading by service, and that's what we're called to do as well. And I think that that's really what we enter into. I know I talked about kind of neutral and hostile and that sort of things, different territories, and I do think that there's some reality within that. But here's the thing: is that be creative, right? There's new ways. I love that you just stated with the family, because when a wife feels like she is journeying on an adventure with you, it's so much better than when she just feels like she's a burden, or you're just slogging along, or you're doing your own thing and leaving
she's
her
shouldering
behind.
the burden for you.
That's right. Exactly.
I mean, man, I think there's so many women who feel like, so this is the lie. Women, well, you've been at work all day. You've had your fun. Now I get to have mine. We didn't have fun. We were slaving away for 8, 10, 12 hours. That's not fun, but I think they feel that way because they are shouldering the burden while we kind of do our own thing. And I think that what you're saying is with the conversation is so important, because, hey, we checking in with one another is like, hey, where are you at? Is everything okay? And that's when you find out about wife's health. You find out about her hormones. You find out about, if she's overwhelmed with, whatever's going on at home or with the kids. That's why date night is so valid or so
It
important
is.
and essential, is because you get to find out about all these things. And my mind goes to, okay, where can I help? Okay,
Mm.
where can I serve? And this is where I think men get it wrong. Men think being a man is like, being in the ring, duking it out, climbing Mount Everest, running the hiking marathon, the trail marathon kind of thing. And yeah, that's all great. But what is most difficult for a man is a man to deny himself and to serve.
Yeah.
That by
Yeah.
far to lower oneself is by far the most difficult thing for a man. And that is, in a sense, the height of masculinity. And until we get this right, our marriages and our families are going to be hollow and they're going to fail.
That's true. You mentioned that you talked to 3 husbands. I'd love to hear a story of a husband too.
Yeah. Husband two, he says that there are 3 reasons why your wife is distant. He said, 1, you married the wrong woman. And he said, too bad. You're Catholic, you're married, you got to suck it up. He said the second reason is that she's hormonally imbalanced and perhaps mineral deficiencies. And so you need to meet her where she's at, perimenopause, menopause, and work with her through it. Make sure that she's seeking, doctors, holistic doctors, whatever. But he said the third reason, the most probable reason, is because it's all about you. And you've
Yep.
just never really deep down addressed her wants, her needs. And it's just been basically your self-indulgent lifestyle, putting yourself number one. And I agree with that. I think that's
Me
like
too.
80%, 90% of the time is we're self-indulgent, we're self-focused. It's all about our work. It's all about us. And our wives are like kind of coming alongside to cheer us along and make sure everything's running, really well at home so we can do whatever we want to do. That's just stupid. So I think that is true. So his advice to all of us is you've got to work on yourself. It begins with your prayer life. And then it's sacrifice. And so you need to figure out where you're sacrificing for her without bringing notice to yourself.
Yes.
But you can't give what you don't have. And so he's
right.
like, if you need to get a counselor, get a priest, get a therapist, but you've got to get over the self-indulgent, kind of mentality and begin to sacrifice.
That's right. Remove that which in your life, which is keeping you in this self-indulgent, all of those sort of things. And so, because you said that, 1 Corinthians popped in my mind is love does not insist on its own way.
Amen.
And what a great example, because my last dimension, so we've got personal, moral, practical, but we also have this like preferential, that which we choose and we just like and prefer. I want to bring up an example of a situation that falls right into that third section that you mentioned with husband number 2. There is there was a man who loved yellow roses, and his wife hated yellow roses. And so he consistently bought his wife yellow roses because he believed that she needed to learn to appreciate God's beauty in all its forms, including these yellow roses, which he preferred. Like, it sounds dumb saying that out loud, but it was absolutely the reality within this relationship. Is this man was so focused on his selfish way of operating, his preferences, that he was imposing those upon his wife with the direct intent to change her disposition, to change her mind, to change her appreciation of beauty. And they were a Catholic couple, and that's what's silly about this. But there is these preferential dimensions, and all I'm going to say about these preferential dimensions is what an amazing opportunity to deny yourself, right? What an amazing opportunity to be a true disciple of Christ, to deny yourself in the way that you like things to go and the way that you want them to go when it comes to these non-moral, non-important situations. If your wife likes your living room to be decorated like this or to be positioned like this, get over yourself, right? Yeah. Again, she's there day in and day out. This is the reality. We make mountains out of molehills, or we make moral claims out of non-moral issues like preferences like this, because that's where selfishness leads, right? Is we think that our way is the only way, and we think that how we have done things or how we should do things is more efficient and is better and all of these sort of things, and we just end up creating this deep division that isn't love, that isn't sacrifice, that isn't denial of self, and just tears the relationship apart. So I think I wanted to bring that up.
It's really good. Yeah,
well.
there's a guy I just heard, this husband, he wouldn't let his wife move any of the furniture, like decorate how she wanted to, but she's at home, all day long, raising the kids, and she's like, but it would be easier for me to take care of the kids and more efficient and all this stuff. And he's like, no, you're not moving it. It's like, dude, lighten up, and I mean,
Yeah.
like, so for me, I mean, like, I'm kind of monastic. I love things to be orderly and less, and I don't like a bunch of junk, I call it junk, but my wife, she loves plants everywhere. She loves filling the space. And like, for me, it's just like, and so like she would get upset at me early on in our marriage because I was so like, in a sense, monastic, like literally the first year or two we didn't have any furniture. I was so monastic, I mean, like we had like one little table, and she's like, this is ridiculous, So like, yeah, it's not like, yes, in denying yourself, it's not like you're like full denial. Like what you're doing is you're trying to come to the center. And this is the whole beauty of marriage, is that you've got two people with different needs, different wants, different backgrounds, different preferences. And then they don't just throw away their preferences or their wants or their needs. They communicate them and figure out how the two can complement one another. Mm-hmm. So my wife likes fuel efficient cars. And those cars are lame. I mean, I hate those cars. Give me the F-250, 350, whatever. That's what I want to drive, right? So, but we've got to come together on that. So, okay, fine, great. We'll get one of those cars for you, and you come to the center. But it's when I'm dictatorial and authoritative. Mm-hmm. That doesn't mean I deny. And this is the key. Husband number 3 says this. I love this. He's not going to allow, because his wife isn't responding, say physically, sexually, intimately, or even like respectfully. Yeah. And she's not responding in any of these ways, right? But he's not going to release his office of authority. He's not going to let that be usurped by low self-esteem or her demeaning. So what he does is, he presses on family prayer. He presses on family dinner. He presses on and taking her out shopping or scheduling a date. He is relentless in maintaining his authority regardless. So, so I love what these guys are saying. One, don't turn to false consolations. Turn to spiritual consolations. 2, recognize that you probably are a majority of the problem with your self-indulgent lifestyle. So start to work on yourself. And then 3, don't allow 1 inch of your authority, the good authority, to be usurped, but continue to press on in your vocational duties to lead your family in love, and make sure your interior life is not hypocritical compared to your external behavior. So by doing all these things, what you do is you eventually build trust, and trust is the base of the relationship, and perhaps you'll win your wife.
That's right. I think so. And I think I just want to say something to that last comment about your authority. It is just for a man to assert that which is good and holy. And so I think assertion is a great word for our role as husband and father. That's not dominating, that's not controlling, but when it comes to things which are good and holy, right? Not yellow roses versus red roses, or, the furniture placement, or not having furniture in your case. Right. But asserting things like family prayer, asserting things like family dinner, asserting that which is good and holy and will allow the family to thrive. And so I appreciate you bringing that up, because that is indeed part of our role as
yes, we must be assertive, but it's also how we're asserting.
Correct.
So my wife is not going to respond to me being assertive by saying, we're going to do this or else, or this is what we're doing. No,
for sure.
That's not how it works. So basically, I've got to be winning her with love and assuring her that this is a partnership, Yes, I have the initiating authority, as Adam did and as Jesus does. I'm in their image, but at the same time, it's not like I'm being authoritative in my assertion, in assertiveness.
Yeah, I agree. So wonderful. Well, that's how to fix your wife.
Oh my gosh! Don't ever say that.
and so
how to fix your
no,
wife is this is how to fix your wife is fix yourself. That's
yes,
how you
exactly.
fix everything, is fix yourself, and other things will just kind of grow out of that, properly
Amen.
speaking.
Exactly. And so I like to think, when approaching this dynamic with our spouse, I break it up into those 4 dimensions: the personal, the moral, the practical, and the preferential, right? Know what it is. But in all of them, like you were just saying, Devin, you got to work on yourself, right? When you're leading by love and loving by leading, when your example, I love that comment that you brought up about not being hypocritical, because there very much is that, right? And I would say that for me, so much in our marriage, that's a reality, is that I might be doing all the practices, I might be checking all the boxes, but if I'm like have the shortest fuse and I shout at my kids every single time there's an infraction, I brought it up on the show before. This great priest in confession once asked me the age of my children, and I think one was 7 and all the others were younger than 7. And he was like, oh, okay, so they're not of the age of reason yet. He goes, so to be clear, he's like, you're yelling at them not because they're offending God, but because they're offending you. And I remember when he said that, it was just like,
Yeah.
oh
Yeah.
goodness, and how true that is. And so if we want to be that example, we have to work on ourselves. We have to turn to the strength of Christ, which can guide us through. We have to turn to the promptings of the Holy Spirit. And there's where I find the putting on the new man for this week. And so the putting on the new man is that challenge that we bring up every single week. And this week, I want you to do a small act of sacrifice or service for your wife without her knowing. Like that's the intent. The intent is you're going to clean up. You're going to wipe down the countertops. You're going to clean up the dishes. You're going to vacuum a room. You're going to do these sort of things that bring order to her life without her knowing it, these small sacrifices. And so that's the challenge that I put for men this week. So, Devin, any final thoughts that you would like to say on how to love our wives appropriately and how to have these conversations when we truly do love our wives and the struggles of marriage befall us?
If you win her trust, you have everything. She will follow you to the ends of the earth. If you are a hypocrite and you are living for yourself, she will follow you to the end of the driveway where you are leaving and she's keeping the house.
Yes. Thank you, Devin. So thank you, all our listeners. If you have any questions, please send them to us at podcast@catholicgentleman.com. I love receiving those for you. I pass them on to Devin. We read through them. And so thank you so very much for joining us today. And as we end each of our episodes,
be a man, be a saint.